Florida is still caught between black and white, still stuck between extremely low inventory and enormous pressure on prices. Will prices really come down? We're finally seeing some areas where prices are dropping, but it's still not enough. Plus, we see Miami-Dade under that same pressure, and prices just aren't budging. Miami-Dade has changed the outlook from what could have been the tragedy of 2008, or what could have been a golden era between 2010 and 2020, with much greater affordability. And we're still in this turbulence that keeps many people from being able to buy a home because prices, inventory, and all the problems that come with trying to buy a house are what dominate the market. You always need someone to help you, but you also need a market that gives you opportunities to get in. Today, we're going to look at some numbers about what's been happening in Miami-Dade. We're going to look at numbers from all the main cities so you can understand the whole picture. Additionally, there's a key factor. Everyone blames new construction. There's too much new construction in Central Florida. There's too much new construction in South Florida. But in reality, this construction isn't being absorbed. There are a lot of houses left over, and that's causing prices to drop. Or are the houses actually selling? It might sound silly, but the builders know what they're doing. A lot of people say, too many homes, this is going to collapse. But the builders measure things very carefully, and we're going to look at the numbers the builders have, how they're gauging the market, and what the main players at these these construction companies are saying, so you can get first-hand information about what's happening and make smart decisions with accurate numbers in Florida. As always, it's me, Gabriel Perozzo, and I'm here with my friend and business partner,
YENITZE Molina. It's a great pleasure to be with you all today.
Jenny. There's a video we watch every month, and it's important that we watch it again, where the Miami Association of Realtors gives us an update on the situation from the previous month. We're going to look at what happened with the official numbers in June, and we always analyze this video in detail because these are the official figures for us, the real estate agents. Here we have the Miami Market Focus Report, and we can see that overall sales decreased by 10.1% from June 24th to June 25th. We're talking about fewer than 2,000 sales in the county. Then we see that single-family homes dropped by 7%, meaning we're seeing less sales volume. When we look at townhouses and condos, it's 13% less. It's important to note that condos always tend to suffer a bit more than single-family homes. Then we see it in dollar volume, Jenny, which we hadn't looked at before, and that's minus 13.1. In other words, the dollar volume dropped more than the number of transactions. That means prices are softening or there's less volume. Similarly, condos dropped by 13.8% in dollar value, with $715 million negotiated. Active listings, 38.5% more in total. We went from 13,000 to 18,000. Let's remember that before the pandemic, the normal level was around 20,000 properties. In other words, even though it grew by 38%, we're still at pre-pandemic levels. Then, when we look at single-family homes, we have 6.6 months of inventory. We're still in a balanced market, but this statistic keeps rising. Every month, we move from a buyer's market. We saw it reaching a balanced market, and when we get to 7 or 8 months, we're going to start seeing a buyer's market again. We're looking at condos, 14. We've already gone up this year. We're in a buyer's market, and it's an aggressive buyer's market. Now is the time to negotiate for a condo, a townhouse, and to get into the market if you want to buy. A lot of people say, With these prices, it's impossible. Hold on, let's put this into context. There's a high price. It's true. In 2022, there was a high price. Back then, you couldn't negotiate that price because there were very few homes available. Now, we've reached a point where the price is still a bit high, but you can negotiate. What's the next stage? What's the next step? That prices actually go down. And then there's not necessarily any negotiation because all the prices are dropping. And what happens then? When all the prices are coming down, a lot more people jump in. I prefer to fight for my low price by negotiating on the properties I'm interested in, rather than waiting for all the properties to drop in price. A situation you can't control because you don't know if they'll all go down. And if they do, there's less room to negotiate since everything is dropping. So, it's a good time to put pressure on any seller of a property you want. Why is that? Because there could be a lot of sellers already at the point of desperation. Then you have this. The price of single family homes increased by 2%. In other words, prices keep going up, even though fewer are being sold and there's a lot of inventory. Condominiums, surprisingly, Jenny, actually moved into positive territory according to this figure. We need to see why, because this could also be influenced by $1 million sales. What's going on? In Miami, there are new buildings, that are delivered all at once, and that can affect the numbers. For example, the Aston Martin Tower is being delivered in June. That causes prices overall to rise a lot compared to lower priced properties. So, we need to look at the analysis after this. And we're still at 1.2% of sales being short sales or REOs. In other words, there are hardly any foreclosures. For every 100 sales, there's just one property being sold under distress. Jenny, looking at the article that supports this video, what numbers do we have?
Look, I always point out what's different to add value to the video. Condominiums in Miami-Dade County that are in older buildings over 30 years old spend less time on the market than newer buildings that are 29 years old or less, 62 days versus 79, respectively. What does this mean? Maybe there are a lot of ways to interpret this. Maybe the people who own apartments in the older condominiums have lower prices and more room to negotiate, and that's simply why they're selling faster than the new ones. We know there are investors buying up units that are either outside or, let's say, in a condo association that's missing some kind of certification, but somehow they know they're going to get it eventually. And that's being reflected here. Then the sale prices of condos in Miami have appreciated by 117% over the last 10 years. And the sale price of single-family units in Miami-Dade County has increased from right now from 157 to 670. It has increased consecutively over the last 163 months, which is 13.5 years. That's a very, very, very long streak of time in which home prices have kept rising consecutively. The prices of single-family homes in Miami have increased by 139.3% from 2015 to 2025, from 280,000 to 670,000. That's quite a significant increase. The appreciation of single-family units in Miami, bought in the fourth quarter of 2009 and sold in the fourth quarter of 2024, amounts to 555,000. The average appreciation nationwide is 306,600. Look at the difference. We could almost say it's double. That's why we always encourage people. In fact, we did an analysis for a client to invest. Units in Miami, units in Orlando, units in Tampa. Even though the cost of units in Miami is higher, it makes more sense to invest here. Number one, appreciation. Number two, the rent is much higher, and that's why you get a better return on your money. So Miami, even though the cost is higher, it makes more sense. You're going to get a higher return for the money you're investing. Also, there's something here that Gabriel mentioned. The total inventory in Miami is 15.6% below pre-pandemic levels. Currently, we have 18,715 units, and before the pandemic, we had 22,163. It is true that there has been a considerable year-over-year increase. And it is true that I can't compare the inventory because today things are much more expensive. But what we want to talk about is the supply. How many units do you have on the market? We still haven't reached the pre-pandemic level. Additionally, I have an article that emphasizes what I just told you. In other words, 14 consecutive years of appreciation in the price of a single-family home. In more detail, here we see that home prices in Miami increased by 2%, but this article breaks it down by city. The city of Miami for percent. Miami Gardens, 1%. Coral Gables, 3%. Hialeah, 5%. Hialeah is moving incredibly fast. Doral, 12%. As Gabriel mentioned, sometimes there are units or sales records that are they're outliers compared to the normal market, and that's what this is. Doral has gone up. It's a very good market, but not by 12%. Homestead, 2%. Florida City, again, I have to say, maybe there was a record that threw off the average. 22% is inaccurate, but honestly, Florida City is selling quite well. Condos, exactly the same situation. In Miami for percent. Miami Beach, 14%. Aventura, 15%. Here you can see what you were saying about the pre-construction units. Hialeah, 8%. And there was a decrease in properties, a drop in prices in Sunny Isles, 3%, and in Doral, 6%. There's something I want to show you from a report that these articles include, and it's right here. I want to show you the months of inventory by price range. What for? What is this useful for? Well, it helps you know how aggressive or how radical you need to be when making an offer or a sale. For units priced between $250,000 and $300,000, we have 3.2 months of inventory. Yes, it has increased over time, but it's not like we have 6 months of inventory. I can't go into the market thinking I have 6 months of inventory for all products and act that way. It's very important to go to the area and check the inventory in that area by price range. For 600 units, 600,000 or $1 million, I already have 6 months of inventory, and for anything over $1 million, I have 11 months of inventory. So my sales and purchasing strategy has to be different depending on the price range I'm in. This is a single-family home, and this tells me about days on inventory. If you notice, obviously the more affordable ones sell much faster. When I go to, let me see, I think I need to scroll down a bit here. When I look at condos and I want to see the same thing, months of inventory, for units from 250 to 300,000, I have 13 months of inventory. For units over $1 million, I have almost 20 months of inventory. Based on this, I implement my buying strategy, my selling strategy. And the days, well, incredibly, the units priced between 300 and 400,000 are selling faster than the more affordable ones. And this surely has to do with the reserves and the certifications of the associations. Really, this is important information that helps you as a buyer and as a seller to know what your strategy should be to achieve your goal in Miami. Important. Negotiation exists. Negotiation is possible. Today, we are on both the buyer's and seller's side. And we know how important it is for you to know these numbers. As a seller, you saw how flexible you can be with a well-qualified buyer. And as a buyer, you saw how aggressive you need to be to secure the purchase of your property.
Yes, we are indeed in difficult times where information and knowledge of the market make all the difference. We always ask you, please look for real estate agents who know the market, not agents who just look for leads online. Try to get your attention by dancing and telling you that a product is the best in the world. Demand that they show you several options. Demand that they show you numbers, that they know the market, and that they really give you the knowledge you need to be able to make a purchase. Simply having a license doesn't make you a good real estate agent. There has to be information. With us, we're always at your service. Whatever you need, you can write to us, you can call us. Our numbers are always on the screen, so you can get the best possible advice when buying, selling, or renting a home in Florida. Let's keep looking, Jenny, at the pre-construction options. We have a report from the folks at Recyclo, which talks about three multi-million-dollar home builders sharing their opinions on the current real estate market. We're talking about Pulte Group, Taylor Morrison, and Meritage Homes. They're generally discussing what's happening right now. I wanted to focus on what directly relates to Florida. We already talked in the previous podcast about the comments regarding the number of incentives and the compression of profit margins. In other words, how they're reducing, let's say, their profits in order to help buyers, especially when it comes to interest rates. They're lowering their margins and increasing incentives. But what effect is this having on Florida? And is Florida really in a complicated situation right now? We could already see it in the section where they talk about the regional dynamics of the real estate market. And in fact, here's the comment I wanted to highlight for you. The comment tells us that people, this comes from Pulte, and it says, I would also like to highlight the positive figures for net new orders obtained in Florida, since our operations increased orders by 2% compared to the previous year. In other words, Pulte is selling more than in 2024. All those people who see the construction and say, these people, this is going to be a disaster. 2008 is coming. Ladies and gentlemen, despite high interest rates, the strict requirements to qualify for a loan, and the amount of inventory out there, companies like Pulte say they're selling more. They say, we are very happy with what we're experiencing in Florida. It's their biggest market, and I'm not really that surprised. We're still optimistic about Florida. The upper tier buyer in Florida increased by 18% year over year, so we're pretty satisfied with the results. The active adult buyer performed excellently in Florida. The Northeast Florida market was a bit slower for us. I mean, we're talking about everything related to the Gulf Coast, but even so, Florida remains important. They say, certainly, the entry-level buyer in Florida isn't immune to some of these affordability challenges. What they mean is that people with money are coming in and buying a lot from them. There are people facing affordability issues, but they keep helping them with everything related to benefits. When we look at this in numbers, here we can see Florida for Pulte Group. They sold 1,773 housing units. Florida is still selling very well. We keep seeing this. Now this comes from Taylor Morrison, who states, as for Florida, the situation is mixed. Our Orlando business, the largest in Florida, saw a good year-over-year sales increase. This was due to growth in communities and a slight sales pace slowdown. In other words, they're still selling better and building because they're increasing communities. But the most important thing, if I think about Orlando, is that the makeup of their communities is changing drastically from what we've seen in the last 2 years to a more balanced consumer portfolio that's moving away from first-time buyers, which will continue to improve sales, margins, and profitability. What's going on? They see it as a builder, but there's a lot more diversity. There's more investment coming in. They're not just seeing buyers who want to live there, but they're seeing more diversity, and this helps a lot. Why? Because when there's diversity in pre-construction, that helps the market be more spread out in the event of a downturn, making any drop more balanced. Finally, Heritage Home tells us, Florida, Colorado, Austin, and San Antonio continue to face challenging conditions with existing inventory and limited affordability, while the rest of our market perform as expected. As we can see, people at Meritage Home are struggling a bit. But overall, a concern, and many have commented on, is what's happening with the labor force. What's going on with immigration, which is the main source of labor? Here it says, commenting on labor availability and immigration crackdowns, there is labor available. We haven't seen any change. We continue to be the employer of choice. We offer a stable market. This is from the people at Pulte Group. In other words, the immigration issue isn't affecting housing, and there's no price increase coming because of it. When we look at the people from, labor also seems to be more available in our market, possibly due to slower multifamily construction. In other words, they think that since there's less multifamily construction, workers have shifted over, but we still aren't really seeing any impact. What's going on with tariffs? Another topic people thought about. Prices in Florida are going to go up because of tariffs. During our call in the first quarter, we mentioned the possible impact from tariffs, about $5,000 per unit, which could affect us by the end of the fourth quarter. Currently, we expect the impact of tariffs in the fourth quarter to be smaller. In other words, the people at Pulte Group thought it was just $5,000 per home. Now they're seeing that the impact is likely to be less because it hasn't materialized. Taylor Morris. The tariffs haven't had a significant impact. Heritage Home. Our teams never stop bidding or competing for a lower price, a lower cost. I think several of our colleagues have also mentioned that the tariffs haven't affected our numbers. There's no problem with tariffs at the housing level, so we're seeing a strong market in Florida when it comes to tariffs. Finally, I want to show you something interesting. When people ask, but what's happening in Florida and why is this market still on the rise like we've seen? This is just, you can see here, Wall Street Journal, a news article dated July 26, 2025. So very recent. The founder of NI, that is, of ChatGPT, paid $38.2 million for a penthouse facing the ocean in the Miami area, specifically at the Surf Club of Four Seasons private residences in Surfside. He buys a multi-million-dollar home for $38.2 million. Here you can see who bought it, and here you can see what the unit looks like. He bought a penthouse. That's what's happening. Additionally, in the Wall Street Journal, as we can see, dated July 24th, 2 days before the previous news, the co-founder of a software company pays $51 million for the most expensive house in Delray Beach. Here is what the house looks like. Here you can see a bit more of the photo. He bought it from someone who built it in 2008. Karaknik, sorry. In 2002, sorry, built the house. They moved into the house in 2008. It's a newly built house, but breaking records. They tried to sell it for $59 million in 2021. They didn't manage to, and now they're selling it for $51 million. When people ask us, what's going on? Why are prices going down, folks? We keep bringing in everything related to wealth in our state. There was a ranking that came out this week that I don't have on screen for you, but it's interesting to see who is the richest person in each of the states in the United States. Who showed up in Florida? Jeff Bezos. So, when you see that Jeff Bezos, who is the richest man in the world, was at many times the richest man in the world and appears first in the ranking, you say, now we understand why there is indeed so much pressure here, because all of that brings business, all of that brings high-level migration, and it means prices don't come down. There you can see how in just 2 days, sales records are broken. How can we wrap up this podcast, Jenny?
Contact us. You all have a lot of questions. We can answer most of them, and for the ones we can't, believe me, we'll find out and give you our best advice. We can analyze properties for you, tell you why we think it's a good fit, explain it to you with numbers, with supporting data. Our clients, those who write to us and those who have contacted us, know that we send them all the information so that in the end, they can make the best decision. We are real estate agents who can be by your side at every step of the real estate transaction, whether it's buying or selling, to give you our best knowledge and our greatest support so that you can achieve your goal.
That's right. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. That way, you let the platform know it's quality content so it gets shared. Share it if you know someone who is interested in Florida real estate news. Here you have the best of the best with reliable sources, so you can make smart decisions when buying, selling, or renting. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We bring you 4 episodes a week with the very best of real estate in the United States. Thank you so much once again. Where to Live in Miami podcast, a production of Invest in Miami Real Estate. Total transparency.